Hi, I'm Hannah Godfrey. I'm the Senior Surface Access Manager at Gatwick. So my role is kind of covering all of the ground transport networks to and from the airport. So covering all modes of public transport, so rail, bus, coach, but also things like car share, taxi, and believe it or not, actually even active travel, so walking and cycling, sort of mainly focused on our staff, but often kind of a forgotten mode of transport to the airport. So looking very much at kind of long-term strategy, how we improve sustainable transport use by passengers and staff, but also responsible for some of the day-to-day operations and commercial relationships as well.
Yeah. Hi everyone, Tim Leach from Heathrow, Head of Surface Access Strategy, and you can pretty much rinse and repeat Hannah's job description for my role as well. But focused on both the day-to-day achievement of our current surface access targets to improve passenger public transport mode share, reduce journeys to the airport by colleagues, but also increasing the passenger catchment by public transport to the airport is really important for long-term growth. And then also looking ahead to how we develop a surface access network fit for the future of an expanded airport.
Okay. I very glibly mentioned that the airports differ in their fundamental challenges. I said that out loud without thinking it through. Could you clarify that on my behalf, namely where you see your massive differences between the two airports, or the challenge is different?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in many ways, from a surface access perspective, the challenges are similar. We're trying to achieve quite similar things in terms of getting more people onto rail, more people onto sort of bus and coach. Staff travel is a big challenge. There's an element of scale, which is probably the biggest difference. You know, Heathrow is a lot bigger, but Heathrow also has more transfer passengers. So actually, once you take those out of the mix, in pure numbers terms, we're not that sort of far off, but Heathrow is obviously a slightly more kind of spread out campus. You've got more terminals, so there's just different and different sort of environment that we're within. Gatwick is a bit more rural, whereas Heathrow is clearly sort of right on the edge of sort of West London. So,
Anything you'd add to that?
No, again, I'll be stealing Hannah's later probably, but yeah, I think that covers it.
And obviously we could be here all night, so what we decided to do is to try and limit the questions down to specific areas that both of you can give your own approach to. So the first one is the commercial pressures that you have versus the sustainability goals, and how do you balance revenue coming from parking versus the need to reduce car dependency? Do you want to start with that one?
I'll let Tim steal his thunder again.
So, it's a really good question, and it is one that we need to get right, and it's probably easier than it sounds to get the two working to complement each other. Yeah. So within our wider surface access team at Heathrow, my boss has oversight of the revenues that we make from surface access and running the Heathrow Express, as well as my remit, which is about increasing the sustainable modes. We talk about that by having a surface access spectrum of the modes. If you have drop-off at one end, which is, to our mind, the mode that generates the most congestion. If you, it's effectively 4 vehicle trips per passenger trip if you have an empty leg in each direction. And as you shift people along the spectrum, you get to car parking and then sustainable public transport at the other end of the spectrum. And we often get asked, how can you be serious about being sustainable if you're promoting car parking? But it definitely has a role in reducing total number of vehicle trips, and in so doing, reducing carbon emissions too. If you can move people up that spectrum from drop-off to parking to surface to public transport, you're actually going to achieve a lot of the objectives that you have. And you can also, we obviously work for businesses that need to make money, but the money that we can make from car parking and drop-off helps to then in turn invest in public transport. So we invest in bus and coach routes around the airport, and the healthier our car parking proposition, the more money there then is to invest millions of pounds a year in subsidising bus routes to achieve.
Oh, so you subsidise the companies themselves or certain routes?
Yeah, so there are a lot of routes around the airport that, particularly early and late journeys, where those routes might not be commercially viable. It allows us to then invest and make those routes viable for passengers and particularly colleagues at all times of day.
Okay. anything we'd like to add?
Not really. Yeah, we do sort of very similar. I think Tim's made the points really well. I think the levy on car parking kind of spaces and staff parking just enables us to make tweaks to services that might not otherwise happen. So it allows us to look at our data, so particularly staff travel data. Where are our staff living? How do we target services that meet their needs for particular shifts? I mean, Gatwick, we have some security shifts that start at 2 a.m. in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
So you can imagine public transport networks aren't naturally set up to kind of support those. But yeah, and I think that's where things like pricing sort of come in from a passenger perspective. As Tim said, actually, things like drop-off charges, while not popular sort of publicly, do play a really important role in shifting people up that spectrum and just making public transport more of an active consideration for passengers than it might otherwise be.
Actually, could I explore that point a bit more, because pricing is obviously within your control. Is it a useful lever or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think since we introduced the drop-off charge, we have seen a decrease in what we call those kiss and fly journeys, so those drop-off journeys. So it's having the impact that we want it to. And if we're shifting those into car parking, that's 2 less journeys on the road. That's good for emissions. It's good for local congestion. So yeah, it does work. We actually hit our 2030 target for kiss and fly reduction in 2024. So it is working.
And sorry, just if you don't mind me interrupting there for a second, but if you look at those 2 measures, can you see the correlation? That one going down, the use of drop-off going down and car park usage going up at the same time?
Well, not necessarily even sort of car park usage going up, because actually what the other benefit is that it does increase public transport use as well.
Oh, as well.
So,
okay.
yeah, so you sort of see that correlation of all 3 modes sort of moving sort of in the right direction that we want to see anyway.
And I'm conscious that so far I asked the question, you both say, well, we both answered the same answer. So if you want to add anything to that, or because we can always move on if the answer is exactly the same.
Yeah, I've got a similar answer, but we're definitely, since terminal drop-off charge has come in, you do begin to see those modes interacting with each other. You need to get the prices right so they balance out. But yeah, we've definitely seen forecourt usage drop off since that charge.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's interesting, because sometimes you hear the theory and wonder whether the reality is anywhere near, so it's good to hear. So far, most of the discussion has been focused on passenger journeys, but you have alluded to staff travel. And I think most of us don't realise how many people work, at the airport 24/7. So the balance between the two, where's your focus? Where does it need to be?
So colleague travel accounts for about a quarter of the equivalent of carbon emissions from passengers at Heathrow, which is, it sounds about right, if you consider there's about 80,000 people working at Heathrow, obviously not all on site every single day.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people working at the airport, and it's actually, on one hand, easier to influence colleagues. You have more of an opportunity to influence their decision and how they commute when they're doing that journey every day. I think as a passenger, if you're coming to the airport a few times a year, I think you're probably more likely to be set on what works for you.
Yeah.
Whereas the colleague, there is the opportunity to influence and have more engagement, and it's really important that we do. That we engage and make people aware of the opportunities that are there to travel. Particularly, I think we were on another panel earlier. We're talking a lot about the need for availability of public transport at all times of day. If you don't have early and late public transport options for colleagues, then you're missing out on half of your staff can't get to work without using their car. Because if there's no something in the morning, they can't get to work. But even if there's public transport in the day, but they go home after the last bus has left, then they have to drive anyway. So
my maths is that's at least 12.5% of the overall number that you wouldn't be affecting if you didn't do something about it. Okay. So would it be the same for you, Hannah?
Yeah, and actually I think in some ways staff journeys are the harder to influence, because almost because people are doing them every day, they become very ingrained behaviours. We've been talking a lot today about sort of staff culture, and there's a real sort of dependence on parking and single occupancy car journeys at sort of particularly Gatwick, but I think when we speak to colleagues at airports across the UK. So actually sort of trying to challenge some of those ingrained behaviours and thinking about other ways to travel to work.
Yeah.
Part of that is providing those services. So as I say, investing in the local bus services, finding those sort of 24-hour routes that serve key staff catchments. But it's also about, we've launched a new staff car share scheme in the last few months. And so it's about sort of showing colleagues that actually you can still have the convenience of a car, but actually you can share that journey. And if you fit 4 people or even 5 people in one car, you're removing all of those extra vehicles from the road. So that's where, again, when you come to kind of the staff travel spectrum, car share is a really great way, particularly for shift workers. We've seen shift workers really embrace the car share scheme, because if you're travelling in for those really early morning shifts, it's quite nice for people to sometimes share the strain of that drive, equally driving back after maybe a 12-hour shift. Just sort of being able to take it in turns, share some of those additional costs, I think people have really valued.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a car share scheme too that's been successful over a lot of years, but it still comes with its own challenges. Heathrow's the biggest single site employer in the country, yet it's not really one site. It's so dispersed in terms of the terminals and cargo and the hangars, and so the car share is great, but when you factor in shift work and the fact that your end destination is could be 10 kilometres around the edge of Heathrow. You could, it's not always that convenient, even if you're both working at Heathrow. So it comes with its challenges then, and that's where getting campus connectivity is important too for us. So active travel comes into that, but also getting the right buses that can get people around the perimeter. So.
And you mentioned, well, both of you mentioned about sharing the costs or financing or helping to finance bus routes. Any other either things you'd like to see or you are actually seeing in terms of collaboration with other bodies to help you achieve your goals, or is it down to you to do it by yourselves?
No, I think collaboration's absolutely vital. Like, as airports, we're not running the transport network.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought, yeah.
We need to have good relationships with all of those operators. So local buses, coaches, but also particularly rail, because ultimately rail is high density, high capacity, and also in our case it's high frequency. So we can really move high numbers. So working kind of closely with rail operators, but also with Network Rail, and in future GBR is absolutely crucial. So one of the things that I've been working on that I'm really excited about for this summer is we're launching a trial of overnight services on the North Downs line with Great Western Railway. Okay. So that's a route that connects Gatwick to Reading, so it kind of goes through the North Downs, through Surrey, and into sort of Berkshire and bits of Hampshire. And that's a really exciting move for us, because that is about opening up public transport opportunities to new markets who haven't previously had access to public transport options. So about 20 to 25% of our passengers fly out in our first wave, which is sort of 6 to 8 a.m. Okay. And of course, public transport isn't always operational. Yeah. So if you're having to arrive at the airport for 3 a.m. to get on or arrive at the airport at 4, say, for 2 hours before a 6 a.m. flight, the network isn't there. So one of the projects that we've been working on particularly strongly over the last couple of years is this sort of overnight trial. So that's coming through from June to September this year, and we're really looking forward to sort of seeing how that goes, and how we can hopefully expand that to other routes, and potentially sort of more nights of the week as well, sort of next year and beyond.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I can add. We've been talking a lot today about an example of where we probably could be more joined up. Around ticketing, which is a problem of the fact that the UK is quite disjointed in terms of ownership and operation of public transport sector. But a couple of good examples where it's really worked is Project Brunel, that is a project that Network Rail have been running on the Great Western Main Line over the last couple of years, where performance was really struggling 2 years ago, which was impacting Heathrow because of that's the route that the Heathrow Express and Elizabeth Line run on. But actually some really good cross-industry work and data-led initiative to target the right improvements rather than patching things up has actually seen performance really improve in the last 2 years. And you need that reliability of service to make sure that people are attracted to use public transport. And then another example is local authorities. So Heathrow is surrounded by 5. Each corner of Heathrow is in a different local authority, and we sit across both London and Surrey and Slough. Which can make joined up working quite difficult, but actually we've done some really good work to develop a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. So Hannah was talking about active travel earlier, but this is really important so that we're providing cycle and safe cycle and walking routes around the airport, but then also the routes into the airport.
So you drive to the hub and then come in the last bit?
Well, there's a bit of that too, but it's also just I'm forgetting 20% of Heathrow's staff live within 5 kilometres of the airport.
Okay.
Who on a sunny day could easily not be driving to work, but could be coming in through even more sustainable means. So it's a great example of where our work with local authorities is prioritising the right investments that are going to maximise the return on investment for the number of people using them, providing not just connections around the airport, but ensuring people can actually get to the airport as well. And the same, we work with them on prioritising and investing in the right bus routes, so that Heathrow is not just a hub, but it's got all the spokes that join the whole picture together.
Do you have any view on other airports in other geos or Europe or anywhere that does it better, that has a more joined up approach, or is it everybody has exactly the same challenge?
I was doing a lot of talking. We were talking earlier actually a bit about European examples when it comes to ticketing. And in Germany's always sort of...
I knew you were going to say that.
Exactly, it's a predictable answer, but it's an example of where the ticketing system works, because it's one operator, transport operator in Germany. You can buy your onward travel through Lufthansa at the right point in that journey. And we're saying earlier, a stat that always surprises me is that our research shows that 30% of passengers arrive at the airport, land at the airport, not knowing how they're getting to their onward destination.
Yeah.
But as a transport professional, that always surprises me, because that would be the first thing I think of. But what you need to do from a ticketing perspective is make people thinking about the onward travel at the right point in that decision-making process.
Yeah.
You're much more likely to choose a sustainable mode of public transport when you're at the earliest stage in the journey.
Yeah, planning it.
Yeah, once you arrive at the airport, you're going to choose the easiest, most convenient, which is often taxi.
Or the guy that grabs you and says, tickets, mate?
Exactly. So a more integrated ticketing system would allow people to make that choice earlier in the decision-making process. So.
Understood. Would you add to that at all?
I guess the only other thing to add is that sort of reliability, and we talk about sort of passenger comfort blanket, so making passengers feel really safe and secure with public transport, as opposed to feeling like it's a risky option. So, things like travel insurance are kind of the basics, but there are a lot of people that still don't travel with travel insurance, which always blows my mind. But things like, actually, can you introduce kind of travel guarantees with your rail tickets? So Fly to Get, which is the Norwegian, I think the Oslo.
I've used them.
I haven't had the chance to use it yet, but I've heard really good things. But they have a travel guarantee, so if the rail network is disrupted and you miss your flight as a result, they will cover your replacement flight and things like that.
I have used it. And actually, when you're on it, you do have the output to show your flights and whether you're still going to be on time and whether it's been delayed. So there are a lot, which means you can use more airport facilities. It kind of gave me the impression of being more joined up, so rather than, can we patch over, as you mentioned the word, patching over existing issues. I mean, as we're coming towards the end, are there any questions on the floor for anybody having questions about Heathrow or Gatwick? No. So everybody has misconceptions about service travel. What are the ones that hit you most? Have we covered them? As in staff versus versus customers, as in you don't think about it, as in it's a money spinning kind of tool for you. What do the normal misconceptions of your roles be?
I think a lot of it comes down to what we've talked about, in that airports are not operating alone in this. Is that we don't control the rail networks, we don't control the bus networks. We can influence, we can absolutely work with people, and we want to collaborate, we want to cooperate, but we can't kind of do that in isolation. So I think that's where there's sometimes a perception that, this is airports' problem to solve, and it really isn't. This is about kind of reducing decades of entrenched sort of car dependency, and actually if we can get people thinking about using public transport for their airport journey, maybe they're going to start thinking about using that for their commute or more regular leisure journeys. So we can kind of really play, I think, an important role in kind of opening like public transport use up to maybe new markets who might not previously have considered it.
One area that joined up thinking, we had a designer on earlier who looking at the big hubs around the globe, and he was saying that they get in quite early to say, hang on, what's the communication story? When do people make those decisions? How do I make sure that when I buy my ticket and I have a box for ticket insurance that I have my travel? But do those things come into your way of thinking, or is that down to the airlines? How can you collaborate with the people who use your facility to make the joined up thinking, as it were?
Yeah, I think it has to be on all of us. I think we were speaking earlier about the fact that actually airports don't have a direct relationship with passengers. They don't buy their tickets through us. Yeah. So we can provide airlines with the contacts and that sort of thing. So we often sort of play that sort of like third wheel role where we sort of try and direct people in the right way. But airports can play their own role in sort of marketing campaigns. We can maximise and emphasise what others are doing. But there is always an opportunity to be more joined up in the way that we do that.
Final word?
I think to summarise for us, I think that the key to unlocking more sustainable transport to airports is probably it's about providing passengers with choice.
Yeah.
We recognise that public transport is not always going to be suitable for everybody.
Of course.
There are locations where it's much harder. There are personal situations where it's much harder. But our aspiration is to provide choice to passengers and colleagues as well, actually, to serve areas that are underserved by rail or by bus. But you need to give people an active choice. They're not forced to make a decision, but something that they choose to do because you've made it attractive enough that they would do it once and then do it again. And then tell their friends.
And when you say attractive there, do you mean attractive financially or?
I think it's a combination of things, but you need to get the experience right. I think airport passengers are quite distinct users of public transport. They're not your average rail commuter or bus commuter.
Yeah, sure.
They're coming with luggage. They're often families. They have to be where they need to be on time. So they can't be late for work. They're missing their flight. Might not speaking exactly.
Good point.
And the luggage in particular is a really important factor. So you need to give people the right facilities and the right experience, that their luggage isn't going to be rolling down the bus. It's not going to be piled high. It's
been there.
Exactly. If you give someone a bad experience once, or they miss their flight once because of public transport, they're unlikely to do it again. So you really need to get this right.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. Oh, sorry, one question. 2 questions. Sorry. I'd say catch, but don't. There's a gentleman at the back and then here, and then we need to wrap it up. So last 2 questions.
Tim, following on from your comment that 30% of people arrive at the airport with no idea how they're going to get to their destination.
Yeah.
To improve that, is the thinking around sort of like when somebody books their flight, they might be prompted to then consider, how am I going to get to the airport, but also from the airport as well, and how might you as an airport influence that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and we're trying to get further upstream that decision-making process. I think Hannah's point earlier is the booking isn't made with the airport; it's made through the airline. So it's about trying to influence and work with airlines to get in there. And the airlines, to credit, are interested in this too. But you're competing with Uber and with National Express and others that are also trying to be the onward mode of choice at that point in the journey. So yes, you definitely need to try and get in there earlier, but again, it's not you're not talking to them. It's not directly within our control. I mean, we do own and operate Heathrow Express, so we do have that direct point of interaction with a customer there. So we try and get in the booking flows of airlines there, but again, you've still got other companies trying to do exactly the same thing. So.
And the last question. Thank you.
Hello, Tim, you spoke about how you're trying to reduce car dependency, because that's the usual way that families, especially, find it easy to get to the airport. How do you say you'd be able to unmarket that? You're trying to work in conjunction with perhaps airlines or perhaps local authorities to get that sort of marketed there, so people are considering that before their flights?
Yeah, again, it's a good question. Marketing is really important. You can put all the best services in the world on, but if no one knows about them, they're not going to use them. So we're talking again a lot earlier about journey planners and how you get that information out there. But I think that the best way to do it is to get in the decision-making flow or the booking flow of the passenger. It comes back to the point we were just talking about, where ideally you buy your onward travel when you buy your plane ticket. But again, beyond that, there's the sort of marketing, advertising, journey planners that can do all that sort of thing. But it does need to be a joined-up effort for sure.
And with that, we're going to have to call it. So
Cool.
Tim, Hannah, thanks very much. I think that's a fantastic session. Thank you. Thank you both.
Welcome.
Very
Thank you.
good. Thank you.